Dear friend, I am grateful to meet you. You are safe here. You can put down your work for the day, relax, close your eyes, listen to my story, and fall asleep slowly in the sound of rain. ASMR Sleep Story. Letters in the Drawer. Emotional bedtime tale to help you sleep. Whisper voice. You know that kind of silence. My friend, the one that doesn't arise, but slowly seeps in, like fog through the cracks of your life, until everything familiar feels coated in something cold and unfamiliar. That was the silence she left behind. It started on a Thursday morning. I remember it was a Thursday because she always left a note on Thursdays. Just a small thing, picked up groceries or dinner at mom's, the casual marks of a life shared. But that day, there was nothing. Just her keys missing from the hook and the scent of her shampoo lingering in the bathroom. You ever wake up and just know something's off? Not because of what's there, but because of what isn't. That was me. I stood in the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee, one already going cold. I waited, checked my phone, poured her cup down the sink, then waited some more. She'd done this before, gone quiet, needed space, a few hours, maybe a day at most. But something about this time, this Thursday, felt final, even before I could name it. I walked the house like a stranger. Every room felt abandoned. Her robe was still draped over the back of the chair, her book half open on the armrest, her sandals by the door. Everything looked as if she might walk back in at any moment. But she didn't. Evening came. Then the next morning, still nothing. I didn't call her at first. Didn't want to seem desperate. Thought maybe she needed a night away, maybe a friend's couch. I rationalized, bargained with the silence. You ever done that? Whispered reasons to yourself so you won't feel foolish or afraid. I did that a lot those first few days. By the 4th day, I started opening drawers. Not because I was looking for something, at least not anything specific, but more like hoping the universe had left me a clue. I pulled open the kitchen drawer, first where we kept batteries and broken pens. Then the hallway drawer with old receipts and phone chargers. I was looking for her, I guess. Some trace of her mind. Something to prove she hadn't just vanished. But all I found was that damn silence. Until one afternoon, almost a week later, I found myself standing in front of her dresser. The bottom drawer stuck a little. It always had. You had to pull it just right. I almost walked away, but something nudged me. You ever felt that? Like some invisible thread pulling your hand where your mind isn't ready to go? I knelt down, gave the drawer a little jiggle, and it slid open. Inside, under a pile of scarves, was a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. They weren't mine. They were never meant for me. And my life, dear listener, would never be the same again. I held them in my hands like they were something sacred. Not just paper and ink, but memory made tangible. The kind that hums under your skin before you even read a word. There were maybe 20 letters, all in the same handwriting. Graceful loops and sharp hooks, the way she always wrote when she didn't think anyone would be reading. But I was reading now. I untied the ribbon with the kind of slowness you give to the past when you're not sure you want to remember it. You know that feeling? Like stepping barefoot into a cold lake, one toe at a time. My friend, if you've ever found something that changes everything you thought you knew well, then you'll understand what those next few hours felt like. The first letter wasn't dated, just a name at the top, Nathan. Not me. Never was. I'll be honest, I almost stopped reading right there. Some part of me didn't want to know who Nathan was, or how long he'd been a part of her life, or why she never mentioned him. But curiosity, that old devil, it doesn't knock. It just walks in, sits down, and lights a cigarette. So I read. She wrote to him like he was the only real thing in her world. Her words weren't romantic, not in the Hallmark card kind of way. They were raw, honest, filled with memories of places I'd never been, jokes I didn't understand, pain I'd never seen her carry. She talked about a lake house, a winter weekend, a song they danced to when no one else was watching. And then, in a line that carved straight through me, she wrote, "I think if I had stayed with you, I might have known peace." Peace. She never used that word with me. I read letter after letter, each one stitched with details that felt like another life entirely. One she lived parallel to ours, like an old song playing in the background, soft enough not to notice until it's all you hear. Nathan wasn't just a name, he was a ghost in our house. In the way she sometimes stared out the window too long, in the way she laughed at certain kinds of movies, in the questions she never answered completely. You ever start to remember things differently once you know more? I thought we had 10 good years. Turns out some of those were shared with someone I never met. And some parts of her, I never really touched at all. But here's the strange part me anger. It didn't come right away. What came first was grief. For the version of her I never knew. For the version of us that never really existed. I grieved like someone had died. Because in a way, she had. That night I poured myself a drink. Saturday on the porch with the letters spread out beside me. The stars looked different. The wind felt colder. Funny how paper and ink can do that. I thought about burning them. One match. Gone. But something told me no. Not yet. Not until I knew the whole story. So I kept reading. And that's when I found the one that started it all. Dated the 3rd of June, 5 years ago. Folded tighter than the rest, with smudged ink on the edges. That letter, my friend, had her confession. Not to Nathan. To me. She never sent it. Never meant me to see it. But once you open a drawer like that, you can't close it again. She began with my name. Not just scribbled across the top of the page, but written with care. Like it was something fragile. To Michael. And then, just beneath it in smaller letters, "If you ever find this, I'm sorry." I remember reading that line over and over, like it would change the fifth time. It didn't. My friend, have you ever read something that made your heart feel like it stepped out of your chest? That letter did that to me. She went on to write things I never expected to hear from her. I never lied to you, she said, but I didn't always give you the whole truth. I think that's the part that stings the most. Not betrayal, but omission. The quiet kind of dishonesty that hides in the cracks between your conversations. She wrote about Nathan, how they met years before we did, how he was her first real love. He broke me, she said, but I never really stopped loving him, not completely. You'd think reading that would set fire to something in me, wouldn't you? But oddly enough, I felt calm, like the truth settled in with a soft thud. She wrote about how hard she tried to forget him. You gave me a good life, Michael, she said. A safe one, a kind one. There were days I felt like I was pretending. God. That word. Pretending. Do you know what it's like to wonder if someone was pretending with you for years? Smiling through dinners, laughing at your dumb jokes, kissing you goodnight. Was it all a role? But she didn't make excuses. That's one thing I'll say. Her words weren't trying to get forgiven. They were just honest. She told me about a day she ran into Nathan in a bookstore in Asheville. We didn't speak, she wrote, but I felt it again, the ache, the what if. She never saw him again after that. But the letters? They started then. Like some part of her needed to talk to him, even if he never read a word. A way to process. Or maybe, hold on. She wrote, I didn't leave you because of Nathan. I left because I finally realized I had to stop choosing comfort over truth. And that's when I knew she wasn't coming back. I folded that letter slowly, hands trembling like I was holding something alive. I couldn't decide if I was more heartbroken or relieved. Maybe both. It's strange, my friend. Sometimes the truth sets you free, but it also burns down the house you were living in. I sat there until the sky turned pink. Birds started chirping like they had no idea the world had changed. And maybe, for them, it hadn't. But for me, everything was different. I took the whole bundle of letters and placed them back in the drawer. I didn't want to read more just yet. It felt like walking through someone else's diary. And honestly, I needed a little air. So I stepped outside, walked down the street barefoot, let the cool pavement remind me I was still here, still breathing, still capable of starting again, and maybe, just maybe, of understanding her. I didn't go back to the drawer for 3 days. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of what I'd find next. You know that feeling, my friend? When you already know the truth might hurt worse than the lie, but you go looking anyway? Like touching a bruise just to feel the ache again. On the fourth morning, I made coffee, let the sun pour through the kitchen window, and finally sat down at the desk again. This time, I opened the drawer slowly, like I was waking something up. The stack of letters hadn't moved, still tied in that same blue ribbon braid, like it had been undone and retied 100 times. I pulled out the second envelope. Her handwriting looked softer on this one, like maybe she wrote it on a day she missed him more than usual. "Dear Nathan," it began. And just like that, I felt the familiar sting again. She wrote about the house. Our house. The way the wind rattled the windows in November, and how she used to imagine what it would be like to curl up beside someone she didn't have to pretend with. "Michael is kind," she wrote, "but kindness doesn't always mean connection." That line hit me harder than I expected, because I thought kindness was connection. I thought showing up, making her tea when she had a cold, rubbing her back on the nights she couldn't sleep, that all of it meant something. But maybe that's the thing. Sometimes love doesn't land where we want it to. She told him about a dream she had. They were back in Maine, on that beach they used to visit as teenagers. "You were laughing," she said, "like you used to before life made you quieter." My hands trembled just reading that, because I had never seen her look that kind of happy. She missed him, not in a way that erased me, but in a way that made me feel like a placeholder, like I'd been filling a seat that was always meant for someone else. You ever feel that way, dear listener? Like you were part of someone's almost? It's a strange ache, quiet and slow, like fog rolling in over a warm field. She ended that letter with, "I hope you're okay. I hope you think of me too when it rains." And I folded the paper back up, gently, like it might break if I moved too fast. There were 10 more like it, all carefully dated. Some just a paragraph, some 4 pages long, some with tear stains, some with lipstick smudges. I didn't read them all that day. I couldn't. I wasn't ready. But I kept going back, one letter at a time, like peeling layers off a life I thought I knew. You know, I never once caught her writing. All those years, and I never saw her sit down with pen and paper. But I suppose we all have parts we hide, don't we? Some people keep secrets in locked boxes, others in drawers, and some, they leave them behind, hoping they'll never be found. But I found them, every word, every page, and the truth, it hurt, but it was also oddly beautiful. She had loved him, not the way she loved me, but with a kind of fire that never really dies. And maybe that's okay, because knowing the truth, even when it hurts, it sets you free. There was something about the ones without dates, my friend. The letters that had no timestamp, no return address, no calendar anchor. Just her handwriting dancing across yellowed pages like thoughts too dangerous to pin down. I found the first undated one tucked behind the others, almost like she meant for it to stay hidden. Or maybe she changed her mind at the last second and never put it with the rest. Dear N. It started. Not even his full name this time. Just a single letter. Intimate. Careless. Like the kind of shorthand people use when their hearts are full and their hands are tired. She wrote, I dreamed about your hands again, holding that cracked mug from the diner off Route 6. Remember that place? I still think about that night. The jukebox, the rain, your laugh. And me? I'd never even been to Route 6. I read that line over and over, letting it settle into the hollow space she'd left behind. Do you know what that feels like? To stumble on someone else's memory and realize you weren't in it? To know that she carried these moments inside her while I was making coffee, folding laundry, planning anniversaries? She'd had this whole other life, and I was just a chapter she never read out loud. There was another letter, messier than the rest. Ink blotched, words crossed out and rewritten. She'd written, Sometimes I forget which life is the lie. Then she'd scratched it out. But I saw it. I felt it. She said, I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore. Michael is good. But you make me feel like the version of myself I actually like. I sat there for a long time after that, my hand still resting on the paper. Her words were like fingerprints left behind on glass, subtle but undeniable. You know, sometimes people tell you the truth without meaning to, in between the words, in what they don't say. And this drawer, this stack of paper heart somehow, it had become the place where her real self had lived. Not in our photo albums. Not in the dinners we shared or the holidays we spent with my parents. But here, folded and hidden, like a secret she was waiting to forget. I'll be honest with you, there was a moment, maybe two, when I hated her. Not the kind of hate that burns. The quiet kind. The kind that just aches. Like realizing someone never really saw you, even when they were looking right at you. And yet, I couldn't stop reading, because every letter was another piece of the puzzle. Not of her, but of us. Of what we were and what we weren't. Have you ever had to unlearn a memory? To go back through your life and realize parts of it weren't yours to keep? It's like finding out your favorite song was about someone else all along. I took the undated letters and wrapped them in soft linen, placed them in an old shoebox, and tucked it at the back of the closet. Not to forget, but because I wasn't ready to carry them yet. I poured a glass of wine that night, sat by the window, and stared out into the kind of silence that doesn't ask questions. And I whispered, "You really loved him, didn't you?" As if the walls would answer. She never did. But her letters? They told me everything. There's this photo frame that sits on the mantel. You probably have one like it too. A silver border, a little tarnished now, but still holding its shine. Inside, I tour wedding day. She's looking over her shoulder, smiling at me like I hung the stars. And I'm just staring at her, like I couldn't believe she picked me. I couldn't bring myself to move it, not even after the letters. Isn't that strange? You'd think I'd want it gone. But no, my friend, some ghosts are quieter when they're kept close. That day, I found myself studying the frame. I leaned in, squinted, like I was trying to see past the glass. Like the truth might be tucked into the folds of her veil or the curve of her smile. And then I noticed it behind the photo. The back was bulging a little. My hands moved before my mind could catch up. I slid open the backing, and behind our wedding picture, folded neatly, was another letter. Smaller than the rest. Older, too. The edges had browned. She hadn't hidden it in a drawer this time. She'd buried it beneath a promise. Dear N. It began again. I almost didn't do it. I almost told him everything. My heart thudded. You know that feeling when your ears start to ring and the room gets just a little too still? Yeah. That. She wrote. I looked at him standing there, bouquet in hand, all nervous smiles and hope, and for a second I thought, maybe I can still choose you. But then I saw my mother in the front row, and his father, wiping his eyes. And I thought, what if love isn't supposed to be a fire? What if it's just something you learn to live with? Can you imagine reading that about your own wedding day? That it was a compromise? That it was the day she didn't follow her heart? I sat there, holding the letter, and I couldn't stop looking at our picture. My smile. Her smile. Frozen in time. And yet behind it a truth so heavy it bowed the back of the frame. There was more. You'll always be the one that got away, she wrote. But I chose safety. I chose steady. I chose Michael. Steady. That word haunted me for days. It echoed through every room, through every memory. I was her steady, not her spark, not her dream. Just the one she chose because the world expected it. I kept the letter, tucked it back where I found it, not out of denial, but because somehow it made everything more real. The love, the betrayal, the ache of knowing I was plan B. You know, we always talk about soulmates like they're fate, but maybe sometimes they're just the ones we don't end up with. Maybe the real love stories are the ones we never get to live. I poured myself another drink that night. Saturday with the lights off, the house wrapped in shadows. And I talked to her. Or maybe to the version of her I thought I knew. You stayed, I whispered. Even when you wanted to run. I don't know if that makes you brave, or just scared. She didn't answer, of course. But the silence? It felt honest. And sometimes, my friend, that's all we get. Honest silence. and a photograph that no longer fits the frame. It was a Saturday. I remember because the house was unusually quiet. No mail trucks rumbling by, no kids riding their bikes up and down the street, hollering to each other like the world was brand new. Just silence and me. I had started organizing things, not really out of necessity, but because I didn't know what else to do with myself. Her clothes were still in the closet. Her perfume still lingered on the sleeves of her cardigan. That cardigan, I couldn't bring myself to wash it. It felt like scrubbing her away. So I moved around the house like a ghost, my friend. Opening drawers, shifting stacks of old magazines, adjusting picture frames. Not because they needed it, but because I needed to feel like I was doing something. That's when I found the little wooden box. It was the kind you'd keep jewelry in. Carved with vines and roses, stained dark with age and use. I'd seen it 100 times. Never gave it a second thought. But this time, I opened it. And there it was, another letter. Folded into thirds, tucked beneath a dried-out sprig of lavender. The scent hit me like a memory. Lavender was her favorite. She used to sprinkle it into pillowcases. Said it made dreams softer. I unfolded the paper slowly. My hands shook. I won't lie to you. And there it was again. Dear N. But this one was different. The handwriting, it looked rushed. Like she had scribbled it quickly, maybe in the heat of some emotion she couldn't contain. She wrote, I saw you today, just across the street from the florist. I wanted to run to you, to call your name, to ask you why you never wrote back. My stomach flipped. Why you disappeared so cleanly without a trace. I waited. God, I waited for years. And when Michael asked me out for coffee, I said yes just to see if the world would feel less empty. It didn't. Not for a long time. But eventually, I stopped waiting. My friend, have you ever felt your insides fold in on themselves? Like gravity shifted, and suddenly you weren't standing in your living room anymore, but somewhere deep inside a hollow version of yourself. That's what this did to me. She was waiting for someone else. Not just dreaming. Not just reminiscing, waiting. And when he didn't come back, I became the consolation prize. I read on. I never stopped loving you. Not really. Even now, when I sit across from him at dinner and we talk about mortgage rates and the best route to avoid traffic on Maple Avenue, you're the one I see. That name. Nor. I began to resent it. A single letter that meant everything and nothing to me. I had to know who it was. I thought about searching her emails, her journals, anything that might give me a clue. But then I stopped myself. Do I really want to know? What would it change? I was still the man who shared a home, a bed, a life with her. Would a name erase all of that? Or would it just haunt me with a face I could never see? I don't have an answer, my friend. Some questions, they're just better left unanswered. Like those dreams you wake from, your heart racing, but the details already slipping through your fingers. You ever have one of those dreams? The ones that feel more real than waking life? Where someone you barely remember suddenly feels like home. Maybe that's what he was to her. A dream she never woke from. I closed the box, placed it back where it belonged, and walked outside. The air was cool. The sky one of those muted blues you only get in late autumn. I breathed in deeply, and for a moment, I felt like a stranger in my own story. I couldn't stop thinking about the letter. Even days later, my mind kept drifting back to the words she'd written. The way she spoke to him to end with such quiet longing, it stayed with me, like perfume on the collar of a coat that hadn't been worn in years. Have you ever come across something that made your heart ache for someone you didn't even know? It's strange. I didn't know N, not even his full name, not his face, not his story. And yet, I felt as though we were tangled in the same knot, pulled in different directions by a woman neither of us fully understood. The letter became my shadow. I found myself rereading it in my mind while brushing my teeth, while waiting in line at the grocery store, while lying in bed at night staring at the ceiling, wondering what dreams she used to have beside me. And then, one rainy afternoon, I found another one, hidden beneath a stack of folded scarves in the back of her wardrobe. This one was older, the paper slightly yellowed, the ink faded to a soft brown. She must have written it before we met. "Dear N," it began. I walked past the bookstore we used to visit, the one with the crooked shelves and that old man who always played Sinatra records. He wasn't there today. Maybe he retired. Maybe he passed away. But that smell books, rain, and something faintly sweet was still there. It reminded me of you. She went on to talk about her dreams. I got into that art program I told you about. It's not New York, but it's something. I've been sketching again. Mostly rooftops and quiet streets. Sometimes I draw people too, but I never get your face quite right. It's always almost you. Almost you. God. My chest tightened. How many times had I stood for portraits in her sunroom, watching her eyebrows furrow as she penciled in the curve of my jaw? Was she trying to draw me, or remember him? You know, dear listener, there's something deeply unsettling about loving someone who was still haunted by a ghost you didn't even know existed. A part of her heart was like a locked room I'd never been given the key to. And I'd been fine with that until I knew that someone else had already been inside. I started seeing things differently. The sketchbooks lining the shelves in her art room, were they filled with him? The quiet way she'd stare out the window during thunderstorm squalls. She remembering a rainy afternoon they once shared. I couldn't help myself. I began searching. Not obsessively at first. Just curiously. But curiosity, my friend, it's like a thread. You pull on it, thinking it's just a little loose end. And suddenly the whole sweater starts to unravel. There were notebooks. Journals I'd never noticed before. Some filled with doodles, some with poems. but buried among them were pages of unsent letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to N. She wrote to him about her dreams, her fears, her quiet moments of joy. "I made French toast this morning," she wrote in one. "Michael says I put too much cinnamon, but it's how you liked it. I guess I never stopped making it your way." I laughed when I read that. Not because it was funny, because I remembered those breakfasts. Her smile, her warm hands wrapping mine around a mug of coffee. And I never knew it wasn't really my tradition. I was just living inside someone else's memory. Do you know what that feels like, my friend? To be a placeholder in someone's life? To realize the rituals you thought were yours were borrowed? Hand-me-down habits from a love that came before you? It's a strange kind of grief. Not for a person, not for a relationship lost, but for a version of your life you thought was real. And maybe it still was. Maybe her love for me was real, just built on a foundation I never knew was cracked. I sat on the floor of that closet for what felt like hours. Letters spread around me like fallen leaves, each one whispering pieces of a love story I had never been part of, but had unknowingly walked into. When I finally stood, the room spun a little. Not from the motion, but from the weight of knowing too much. And too little. At the same time, I gathered the letters, stacked them neatly, tied them with a soft ribbon I found in her sewing kit, and I placed them back where they had been hidden, where maybe they were meant to stay. They say grief comes in waves, but what no one tells you is that sometimes it isn't the grief of losing someone, the grief of never really having them at all. For weeks after finding the stack of letters, I carried a quiet ache in my chest. Not anger, not jealousy, just this foggy sadness that hung over me, soft and constant like the mist that rolls in from the sea. You ever feel that, my friend? Like your heart is full of something you can't quite name? I kept going through the motions of life. Work, laundry, dinner for one. But everything started to feel like a performance. I'd walk into a room and feel like I was stepping onto a stage I never auditioned for, playing the role of the man she loved, even though I was starting to realize I might have been an understudy all along. One evening, I decided to open a bottle of the red wine she used to like, the one with the handwritten label and the strange cork that always crumbled. I sat out on the back porch with a glass, listening to the wind move through the trees, and I started talking to her. Not out loud, really, just quietly, in my head. Like you do when you talk to someone who isn't there anymore. I asked her why she kept those letters, why she hid them, why she never told me about N. You know what I think? I think we all carry pieces of the people we've loved. Some of them are heavy, some are sharp. Some shine so bright it hurts to look at them. And maybe she didn't mean to hide those letters to deceive me. Maybe she just didn't know how to let go of a version of herself that only existed when she was with him. Still, it changed things. Not dramatically, not overnight, but like the slow settling of dust in a room you haven't entered in years. Everything looked the same, but it no longer felt the same. The house began to feel like a museum of someone else's life. Her paintings on the wall, her perfume in the bathroom drawer, the way her scarf was still looped around the hook by the door. She had left, but not really. Not completely. One Sunday, I took down a framed photo of us. It was from a beach trip 2 summers ago. I remember the way her hair whipped across her face and how she laughed as I tried to hold the camera steady against the wind. We looked happy, and maybe we were. But now, when I looked at it, I couldn't stop wondering what she was thinking in that moment. Was she there with me? Or somewhere else entirely? I flipped the photo over, and there it was, her handwriting on the back. Best day since Barcelona, it read. Barcelona? She'd never been to Spain with me. In fact, I remembered asking her once if she'd ever been, and she said no. So why would she write that? I stared at the words for a long time, my thumb tracing over the loops in her B. And I realized Barcelona must have been a memory of N. Another invisible thread running through the fabric of our life together. It hit me then. I didn't really know her. I knew a version of her, sure. The version she wanted me to see, the one she built carefully over the years. But beneath that, there were layers I'd never touched. A whole world I'd never been invited into. You ever feel like a stranger in your own memories? Like the love you thought was real might have been a beautiful illusion, cast in the light of someone else's shadow? That's how it felt. And it was lonely. But strange as it may sound, there was a kind of peace in it too. Because in knowing the truth, even if it hurt, I was free to stop pretending. I didn't have to keep trying to be the man she needed, the man she remembered, the man she almost loved. I could just be me. A little broken, a little wiser, a little more human. That night, I lit a candle and sat in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, breathing, feeling the quiet. And for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a companion. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. The kind that simply stays. You know how some memories don't come back as pictures but as sounds? For me, it was the sound of her laugh in the morning. That light, careless giggle she'd let out before she'd even opened her eyes. Like the day itself was telling her a secret. It's funny what the heart holds on to. Not the grand gestures. Not the expensive trips or candle-lit dinners. Just the little, unremarkable moments. Her brushing crumbs off the counter. The way she hummed when she was folding laundry. Her sigh right before she fell asleep. After reading the last of the letters, I realized I hadn't written her a single one. Not even during our time apart. She had written N letters that bled with poetry and rawness. And I? I had never even put pen to paper. So, I wrote one, not to send, just to say what I needed to say. It went like this. Dear you, I don't know who I'm writing to anymore. The version of you I thought I knew, she packed up and left with the last suitcase. But something lingers like perfume in a coat you forgot to wash. I wanted to ask you why. Why the letters? Why the silence? Why the walls you built between us that I only discovered after you'd gone? But I realize now, maybe there are no clean answers. You once told me I made you feel safe, and I believed you. But maybe safety wasn't what your heart wanted. Maybe it was something wilder, something I couldn't give. Still, I loved you, the best way I knew how, in the way that packs your lunch without asking, that warms up your car on cold mornings, that remembers which tea you hate. It wasn't the stuff of sonnets, maybe, but it was real. You were my home, and now the lights are out and the windows are open, and I'm learning to live with the wind. Wherever you are, I hope you found peace, maybe even joy. And if he ever writes you back, tell him this. He was lucky once, and so was I. Always me. I folded the letter slowly, slid it into an envelope, then tucked it into the same drawer where I had found hers. It didn't belong to her. Not really. It belonged to the quiet that followed her, to the space she left behind. You ever try writing something down just to set it free? Try it sometime, my friend. It's like wringing your soul out over warm paper. A gentle kind of ache. The days started feeling lighter after that. Not happy, just less heavy. I began doing small things I hadn't done in a while. Watering the plants she forgot about. Playing old records. Cooking meals that didn't come from a box. Grief didn't vanish. It just changed its shape. It stopped shouting and started whispering. And sometimes I even whispered back. One night, I dreamed of her. We weren't fighting. We weren't kissing. We were just walking down a long street, side by side, saying nothing. It was the calmest dream I'd had in months. And when I woke up, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not happiness, not closure, but a kind of readiness to live. Not as half of a couple, not as a heart in mourning, just as me. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. There's this old frame on the bookshelf near the window. It's made of brass, slightly tarnished, with little floral engravings on the corners. She bought it from a flea market years ago. Said it was charmingly ugly. I laughed then, but now I get it. It's the kind of thing that grows on you. Inside the frame is a photo of the two of us. We're at the pier. Windy day. Her hair's a mess. I'm wearing a sweater I never really liked. But our smiles, they're the kind you don't pose for. Candid, full of something like joy, maybe even hope. I used to turn that frame around. Couldn't bear to see it when the house was too quiet. But not anymore. Now I dust it, straighten it when it leans, even talk to it some nights. I know it's silly, but grief makes poets out of all of us. Have you ever done that, my friend? Spoke to someone who isn't there? Not because you expect an answer, but because silence is too loud otherwise. One night, while nursing a glass of something amber and warm, I sat by the photo and asked her aloud, why him? It wasn't anger that pushed the question out, just aching curiosity, like a child asking why the stars don't fall. You don't want them to fall. You just need to understand. No answer came. Of course not. Just the wind outside, brushing against the glass. But I felt something loosen in my chest anyway. That week, I found her journal. It wasn't hidden. Just forgotten, maybe left behind by accident. Leather-bound, pages slightly yellowed. I didn't want to read it. Really, I didn't. But you know how it is. Curiosity doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door in. So I read. The entries were scattered, inconsistent. Some were about her childhood. Stories I'd heard her tell at dinner parties. Others were lists books she wanted to read, recipes she'd never tried, dreams she'd had and forgotten. But one entry stopped me cold. The 17th of January. There are two people I love in this world, and sometimes I think they live on opposite ends of me. One gives me peace. The other sets me on fire. I'm terrified of choosing wrong. I'm terrified of losing both. I sat there with that sentence echoing through me. Peace. That was me. I knew it, deep in my bones. She used to say I was her quiet place. But fire? That was someone else. Someone who wrote her letters soaked in wild words and moonlight metaphors. Someone who saw her not as a home, but a storm. I closed the journal carefully. Didn't read more that night. Didn't drink more either. Just sat there, letting the weight of those words settle into my ribs. Dear one, do you ever feel like you were someone's safe choice, not their wild one? Like you were picked for comfort, not passion? It's a quiet kind of heartbreak. One that doesn't scream. It just hums in the background, like a song you almost recognize but can't quite name. And yet, I wouldn't trade it. Not even now. Because love, even the kind that doesn't last, leaves traces. It leaves warmth on cold nights. It teaches you how to look at the world like it matters. And she mattered. Still does. Even if she's gone. The weather had turned gray again. You know the Kinski like wet cement, air that smells like old rain. I didn't mind it, really. Those kinds of days made everything feel slower, quieter, like the world was whispering. That morning, I went to the coffee shop we used to go to every Sunday. It's still there, tucked between the laundromat and the bookstore. The owner, Marcy, still wears that ridiculous apron with the pink flamingo. She smiled when she saw me, but didn't say much. Just poured the usual and left me alone. Funny how your body remembers things, even when your mind is somewhere else. I sat in the same seat, faced the same foggy window, ordered the same damn muffin I never really liked. And then I opened my bagand, found the letter. It was one of hers, folded neatly. No envelope. No date. Just her handwriting, soft and slanted. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop myself. I always knew I'd leave eventually. You gave me a life I never deserved, and I loved you for it. But I couldn't keep pretending I didn't hear the music playing somewhere else. I wanted to be the woman who stayed. God knows I tried. But I was never her. I hope you hate me a little less for telling you this in ink instead of in person. I stared at it for a long time, my friend. Let the words sink in like slow rain. The waitress came by and refilled my coffee. She didn't ask if I was okay. Maybe she didn't need to. I read the letter again, and then again. Not looking for something new, just trying to make sense of the hurt. Have you ever had your heart broken with kindness? It's not loud. It's not violent. It's a slow ache, like a bruise you forget about until someone presses just the right spot. She didn't lie. Not exactly. She never promised forever. Just a little while. And, dear listener, I think that's the part that hurts the most. She gave me all she had, but not all she was. I sat there until my coffee went cold. Watched the world move past the window. People on their way to somewhere else. Couples holding hands, kids in school uniforms, a man walking his dog in circles. Life didn't stop. Not for me. Not for her. When I left the shop, I folded the letter back up and tucked it into my coat pocket. Not the drawer this time. This one needed to stay close. Not because I forgave her, but because I wanted to remember that love, even when it leaves, still lingers. Still hums in the silence. Still echoes in coffee shops and park benches and the quiet of your own thoughts. And sometimes, even the leaving is a kind of love. I found another letter the next evening. Not hidden this time, just lying on top of the others like it had floated up from the weight of memory. I hadn't opened that drawer in over a week. Part of me thought I wouldn't again. But you know how it is. My friend grief has a way of curling back into your ribs just when you think you've breathed it out. This letter was different. It had a name written across the top. Not mine. Daniel. You ever see your whole world tilt a little from a single word? I sat down slowly, the drawer still open, the air suddenly too thick. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I was curious. Who was Daniel? A lover? A ghost from her past? Or maybe someone she was still writing to while she was with me. I unfolded the letter. Dear Daniel, I know I shouldn't write again. I promised I'd stop. But the silence makes me feel like I'm disappearing. Do you remember that coffee shop near the river? The one with the terrible jazz music? I went there yesterday and sat in our old corner. There was a man 2 tables down reading a book, and for a moment I wondered if he could tell if he could see the ache in my face. I want to tell you I'm okay, but I'm not. Not really. Not when I still see you in every corner of this city. Love always. See, I sat there for what felt like hours, rereading that letter, the words swimming in and out of focus. Love always. Those 2 words folded something sharp inside me. I didn't recognize the version of her in that letter. That vulnerable, wandering soul. It wasn't the woman I knew, no. The woman I knew was steady, warm, present. And yet here she was, leaving breadcrumbs and ink for someone else. I leaned back in my chair, thought about all the times she said she was going for a walk, all the quiet moments she stared off at nothing and told me she was just tired. Maybe she was. Tired of pretending. Dear listener, have you ever discovered a truth you weren't sure you wanted to know? The kind that pulls you apart not because of what it is, but because of what it undoes. Still, I didn't hate her. Isn't that strange? I should have, maybe. But I didn't. There was something tragically human about those letters. Like watching someone whisper their pain into the wind, hoping someone might catch it. I folded the page slowly, tucked it back with the others. My hands didn't shake. Not then. But my heart had begun to echo. Like the soft beginning of a thunderstorm. I poured myself a glass of wine that night. Saturday on the porch with a blanket over my knees. The sky was dark, stars veiled behind low clouds. I didn't cry. I just sat there, quiet. Sometimes silence says everything. Sometimes it says too much. I wonder if Daniel ever wrote her back. Or if, like me, he found her love only after it had left the room. I didn't sleep well after that, my friend. You know the kind of night I mean, where the dark is too quiet, and your mind won't stop circling the same thoughts, like water, draining in a slow, wide spiral. The next morning, I found myself driving without a plan, just following the road. Have you ever done that? Let your hands steer the wheel while your heart does the thinking. I didn't even realize where I was headed until I saw the old sign, the River Cafe. That tiny place by the bend in the river where you could hear the water from the back patio. We'd only been there twice, she never seemed to like it. Said the jazz was too loud and the croissants were always stale. But now I was beginning to wonder if it wasn't the music she was listening for. The cafe hadn't changed. Still painted that faded green. Windows slightly fogged. A couple of mismatched tables outside. I stepped in and ordered a black coffee no croissant. Then I sat down at the corner table facing the river. Her letter had mentioned this table. I could picture her sitting right there, pen in hand, eyes half lost to memory. Maybe this was where she wrote it. I looked around the cafe trying to see her. Not the real her, but the version that lived in that letter. Quiet, fragile, longing for something that wasn't me. Have you ever looked back on love and wondered which version of your partner you truly knew? Was it the person in front of you, or the version they protected deep inside? The waitress came over. She was maybe 60, with silver hair pinned into a knot and a warm, weary smile. She looked at me like she remembered something. "You were here with someone once," she said, wiping down the edge of the table. I nodded. "Years ago?" "She liked the jazz," the woman said. "Most people complained, but not her." She smiled to herself. "Used to sit here and write in a little blue notebook every Thursday morning." Thursday. That was the day she said she went to yoga. I wanted to ask more, but the waitress walked away, humming a soft tune that mingled with the saxophone crackling through the speakers. I sipped my coffee. It was bitter and hot and strangely grounding. I let my eyes rest on the river, the current slow and steady. I thought about how many letters she might have written in this very spot. To Daniel, to herself, to a past that wouldn't let go. There was something both comforting and heartbreaking in the idea that someone you love had an entire world outside of you. A world you never stepped into. My friend, if you're still awake, I want to tell you something. You don't always get to know the full story of someone's heart. Sometimes you only get a chapter, a page, a single letter folded into the corner of a drawer. And that has to be enough. I sat there until the coffee was gone, until the jazz changed tracks, until the sun moved far enough that it touched the side of my face. Then I stood, left a tip beside my empty cup, and walked out into the day, which smelled faintly of river mist and something forgotten. Sometimes closure doesn't come in answers. Sometimes it's just a chair in a cafe and the sound of music someone else used to love. I drove home with the windows down, letting the wind wash through the car like it could clear away everything I'd been carrying. You ever try that, my friend? Just open everything up and hope the breeze understands what you're trying to forget. Back at the house, I made tea instead of coffee. Something softer. Chamomile, maybe. The kind that tastes a little like nothing, and that's exactly what you need sometimes. The letters were still there, right where I'd left them in the drawer, all wrapped in that faded blue ribbon. I hadn't opened any more since that day. But sitting there, warm mug in hand, I felt drawn back to them like a quiet whisper from another room. I untied the ribbon, slowly this time, like I was afraid of waking something sleeping. The letter on top was dated the 2nd of July. My birthday. You can imagine how that hit me. A letter she wrote on my birthday, and it wasn't addressed to me. No name on the envelope, just the date. Dear whoever. I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Elegant, a little rushed, like her thoughts couldn't wait for her pen. The 2nd of July. Today is his birthday, and I baked a pineapple, his favorite. He doesn't know, I cried while peeling the apples. He doesn't see how I look at him sometimes and wish I could reach further back, to the version of myself I lost before we ever met. I smile when he opens his gift, laugh when he makes that same terrible joke, and yet I feel like a ghost inside this house. I miss the woman I was when I used to write to you. The words blurred a little as I read them again. Not from tears, not yet, but from something deeper. That ache behind your ribs when your heart can't decide if it's breaking or remembering. She had been with me, loving me, or at least pretending well enough that I never questioned it. And all the while, she was mourning a self I never got to meet. I thought back to that birthday. I remember the pie. It was a little burnt on the edges, but still warm, sweet. I remember her laughing at something I said, maybe that dumb pun I always made about being peeling. She laughed. But now I wonder if it was real. My friend, have you ever looked back at a memory and realized it was only half yours? That the other half belonged to someone else's sadness? That night, I sat on the floor beside the drawer, letters spread out like cards in a fortune-teller's reading. Each one marked a date. I now recognize it: a weekend we traveled, a dinner party we hosted, a stormy Tuesday when the power went out, and we made love by candlelight. And in every letter a thread of something quietly unraveling. She wasn't just writing to Daniel. She was writing away from me, from us, from whatever life we had built together. It was the birthday letter that broke something in me. Not out of anger, not even betrayal, but because she had been so alone right next to me, and I never knew. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it back into the envelope. For a long time I just sat there, listening to the quiet, letting the silence speak for her. Because sometimes, my friend, silence is the only truth we're left with. When the tea turned cold, I stood up and turned off the lamp. The drawer remained open, like a wound. But I didn't close it. Some stories don't need endings. Just space. Space to breathe. Space to ache. And maybe space to forgive. There's something about going up into an attic that feels like opening a forgotten, memory-dusty, quiet, filled with the smell of old paper in the past. Have you ever climbed up into one, my friend? Where the air is thick and time moves slower. It's like walking into someone else's thoughts. That Saturday morning, I found myself reaching for the attic ladder. Not because I was looking for anything specific, but because the silence in the rest of the house had grown too loud. And sometimes, when everything around you feels still, you go searching for echoes. The attic hadn't been touched in years. I pulled the light cordon of those bulbs that swings when you let go and watch the dust shimmer like tiny ghosts. Boxes. So many boxes. labeled in her handwriting. Summer clothes, Xmas ornaments, old books, and one tucked away in the corner, simply marked letters. I paused. You know that moment, right? When your heart kicks a little harder and the world narrows to just that one thing in front of you? The box wasn't taped shut. It opened easily, and inside more letters, dozens of them, neatly stacked, bound by old ribbons, mismatched twine, even a shoelace or two. But these weren't like the others. They were older, faded, some written on yellowed stationery with dates going back to before I ever met her. One had a return address in Maine. Another, California. They were from people I didn't recognize, women, even one from someone who signed only with initials. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, a breeze sneaking in through the eaves. The house creaked around me like it remembered every story better than I did. I read the first letter slowly. The 12th of October, 1997. You would have loved the ocean today. The wind was brutal, and the gulls sounded like they were arguing with it. I walked for hours, trying to hear your voice in the waves. I miss your laugh, your awful laugh. I'd give anything to hear it echo down this beach just once more. I set it down gently, like it might break. That wasn't written by her. It was to her. She had kept these letters, all of them. Letters from lovers, friends, maybe even people I'd never heard her mention. People who had known her before she was mine. My friend, have you ever realized that the person you loved once lived entire lifetimes you never got to witness? That their heart was shaped by hands you'll never know? I started piecing it together. Her quiet afternoons, her collection of old fountain pens, the way she used to sit at the desk and look out the window for hours. She wasn't staring at nothing. She was remembering. She was reliving. There was a moment when I wanted to be angry, wanted to feel betrayed again. But instead, I just felt humbled. Like I'd stumbled upon a cathedral I didn't know she carried inside her. She was more than I ever saw, and perhaps more than she ever let me see. You know, sometimes we think we know the whole story just because we're in it. But people are like novels written in many hands. We just get a chapter or two. If we're lucky, I put the letters back in the box, careful not to disturb their quiet. Closed the lid. But I didn't feel like I was closing anything. If anything, I was opening up to the idea that love isn't ownership. It's witness. And even if she had left, even if she had written things I wasn't meant to find, I had still been a chapter in her story. And that meant something. The attic light flickered. I stood up, bones creaking a little, like the house. Down the ladder, back to the quiet of the hallway. And somewhere behind me, the past settled gently back into its place. There's something peculiar about photographs, don't you think? They freeze people, pin them like butterflies behind glass. But they never tell the whole truth. Just a slice. A single moment. I found the photo album while looking for batteries. Tucked behind a stack of dusty board games, in a closet I hadn't opened since, well, probably since she left. I almost didn't pull it out, but my fingers knew better. The album was red leather, worn, soft at the edges. Not one I remembered seeing often. Most of our pictures lived in digital frames or cluttered folders on her old laptop. But this was something she'd kept private. Her own archive. I flipped the cover open, half expecting only baby pictures or faded snapshots from her school days. But what I found was more intimate, more deliberate. The first page held a black and white photo of her standing in front of a bookshop. Her head tilted, a sly smile, one hand holding a paper bag. She couldn't have been older than 25. The photo had a caption in her handwriting beneath it. Paris, Rue Mouffetard, October. And next to it, a man, slightly out of focus, caught mid-laugh. Camera slung over one shoulder, cigarette in hand. No name, just another caption. He always hated being in front of the lens. My friend. I sat there for a long while, staring at that page. It didn't feel like jealousy. More like curiosity. Who was he? A traveler? A fling? Something more? I flipped to the next page. More photographs. Rome, Prague, a rooftop in Istanbul. Sometimes she was alone, posing in alleyways, laughing into the sun. Other times, there he was again, the man with the camera. Always in the background. Never the subject. But oh, she loved him. You could tell. Not from the captions or any obvious signs, but in the way she looked when she wasn't posing. The stolen glances, the softened expression. That kind of gaze doesn't lie. I began to realize these weren't just travel photos. They were a chronicle of a relationship, one I'd never known about, one she had quietly carried with her, even as we built a life together. Dear one, have you ever discovered a version of someone you love that they never showed you? It's humbling, painful, maybe, but also strangely beautiful. The next photo was different, taken in what looked like a small apartment kitchen. She was chopping herbs at the counter. He was in the background, again leaning in the doorway, watching her. Nothing posed, just life. On the back of that photo, scrawled in blue ink, "That night we had too much wine. You fell asleep with your feet in my lap, and I wished the night would never end." I closed the album. Gently. My fingers tingled, as if I'd touched something electric. Something sacred. Maybe she kept these memories not because she wanted to hide them, but because they were too precious to be shared. Too delicate for the loud clatter of everyday life. She had lived so much before me. and maybe in small ways, even during. But here's the strange thing. My friend, none of it made me love her less. If anything, it made me love her more. The woman I thought I knew had layers I never touched. And now, even in her absence, she kept unfolding. I put the album back where I found it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I wanted to remember the way she chose to live with those memories. Quietly, tenderly, without ever letting them eclipse what we had. And I thought to myself, maybe we all carry secret photo albums in the corners of our hearts. Stories that make us who we are. Stories we don't always know how to share. So here we are, dear friend. The final drawer. The last of the letters. I waited a long time to open it. Maybe too long. But you see, some stories need to sit quietly in the dark for a while before we're ready to hear them. Like wine aging in the cellar, or a melody humming in the background until you finally notice it. That drawer bottom left of her old writing desk had always been jammed. She used to thump it with the heel of her hand, muttering curses under her breath. I remember laughing at her frustration, never imagining that years later I'd be kneeling in front of it with trembling fingers. It gave with a groan. Inside was a bundle of pale blue envelopes tied together with a faded green ribbon, neatly stacked, unlabeled, like they had been waiting. I untied the ribbon slowly, feeling like I was peeling back layers of her I hadn't earned. But she left them for me, didn't she? She didn't lock the drawer. She didn't burn the letters. Maybe she knew one day I'd be ready to read them. The first letter began simply, "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Not dead. Just gone." She made that clear later. She wrote about the leaving like it was inevitable. Like some tides you can't turn back. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She wrote one letter for each year we were together. 10 in all. They weren't apologies, and they weren't confessions. They were memorishers. From her side. Sometimes they matched mine. Sometimes they didn't. In one, she described the night we got lost on the Oregon coast and ended up camping in the back of the car. You fell asleep with a map on your chest and drooled on Wyoming, she wrote. I laughed. I remembered that. I remembered the fog, the smell of seaweed, her cold toes against my calf. In another, she wrote about the night I proposed. Not the public story we always told at dinner parties. The real one, where I dropped the ring in a bowl of soup and nearly swallowed it. I had forgotten. She hadn't. My friend, do you know what it's like to fall in love with someone all over again when they're already gone? It's devastating. And somehow, it's healing. The last letter was different. No date. No neat paragraphs. Just a single line, scribbled in the same ink she always used for birthday cards. You gave me a home I never thought I deserved. I cried then. not loud, just quietly. The kind of crying that feels like breathing something warm for the first time in days. It's funny. I started this story thinking I'd been betrayed, that the letters I found were proof of secrets, of something stolen from me. But what I found instead was the opposite. Proof of a life fully lived. A heart big enough to hold multitudes. She loved me, and she loved others. And in loving all of us, she became someone I now see more clearly. I've kept the letters, put them in their own box, wrapped the ribbon tight again, not to forget, but to remind myself that people are not puzzles we're meant to solve. They're stories. Some unfinished. Some told in whispers, folded in drawers, waiting for the right hands to find them. And now, I pass the story to you. Not to burden you with it, but to let it rest where stories belong in the hearts of listeners, the quiet corners of late-night rooms, the spaces between dreams and waking. So sleep well, my friend. May your drawers be filled with letters of love. May your memories be kind. And may you always remember sometimes, even goodbye can be a gift. Good night.